You think farming saved us. Every textbook, every teacher, every documentary tells you the same story. We learned to grow our own food, and everything good came after it. Villages, cities, civilization. You. It is supposed to be the proudest moment in the human story. It is also the moment we started dying. The first farmers were shorter, sicker, and died younger than the wild humans who came before them. Their teeth rotted out of their jaws, their spines bent. New plagues crawled out of their own animals and killed their children in the dark. And here is the part that should keep you awake tonight. It happened so slowly, across 10,000 years, 400 human generations, that not one single person ever lived long enough to see it. Nobody chose this. Nobody could stop it. And the damage those first farmers started is still sitting inside your body, right now, as you watch this. This is the invention that slowly killed ancient humans. For almost the entire human story, there were no farms. For roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors were hunter-gatherers. They walked. They followed the herds and the seasons. They ate 100 different wild plants and animals, whatever the land offered that week. It was not a paradise. It was hard, and it was dangerous. But their bodies were built for it, because it was the only life the human body had ever known. Then, about 12,000 years ago, something changed. In a few river valleys, people began to plant seeds on purpose. They learned to keep wild animals inside fences. For the first time, food stopped being something you found and became something you owned. It felt like a miracle. It was the most important decision our species ever made. And it quietly broke us. In 1987, a scientist named Jared Diamond wrote one sentence that detonated inside the study of human history. He called farming the worst mistake in the history of the human race. Not a mistake, the worst one, ever. For generations, the story had been simple and flattering. We were once desperate savages, always one bad day from starvation, until agriculture rescued us. Diamond looked at the very same evidence and saw something monstrous. He saw a trap. He saw a species that wandered into a cage and pulled the door shut behind it, one seed at a time. Because farming did not make us healthier. It made us weaker. But here is what almost nobody talks about. The proof was never written in any book. It was buried in the ground, written into the bones of the dead. When scientists first started measuring the skeletons of ancient humans, the numbers made no sense to them. They expected the farmers to be the strong ones, the winners, the advanced ones. Instead, the bones told the opposite story. A researcher named Lawrence Angel measured skeletons from the lands that became Greece and Turkey. At the end of the Ice Age, before farming, the hunter-gatherer men stood around 5 feet 9 inches tall, the women 5 feet 5. Then agriculture arrived, and by 3,000 years before Christ, the average man had collapsed to just 5 feet 3, the women to 5 feet even. An entire species had physically shrunk. Let that land for a moment. The people who invented civilization were 6 inches smaller than the wild humans they replaced. And here is the detail that should disturb you the most. The Greeks and the Turks alive today still have not fully grown back to the height of their ancestors, who never farmed at all. But the clearest picture comes from a place in Illinois called Dixon Mounds. Buried there are around 800 skeletons, and together they capture an exact moment in time. The moment one people put down the spear and picked up the hoe and turned to farming corn, about 900 years ago. The bones recorded everything that happened next, like a black box from a crashing plane. After the switch to farming, life expectancy fell from 26 years to 19. Tooth defects from malnutrition jumped by half. Iron deficiency anemia increased fourfold. And the scars of infectious disease on the bones tripled in their own bodies, in a few short generations. These were not unlucky individuals. This was an entire population getting sick at once, and the cause was the very thing that was supposed to be saving them: more food, worse food. A wild diet of dozens of plants became a thin diet of 1 or 2 starchy crops. Their stomachs were full and their bodies were starving. Now picture this. It is a summer morning 9,000 years ago in one of the very first crowded towns on Earth, a place we now call Catalhoyuk in what is now Turkey. Up to 8,000 people are packed into mud brick houses built wall to wall with no streets between them. You climb in and out through a hole in the roof. The air is thick. Wood smoke. Animal dung. The pens for the sheep and the cattle sit right against the houses, and the trash pits sit right beside the pens. There is a sound that never stops, the low, grinding scrape of stone on stone, as women kneel for hours every single day, crushing grain into flour by hand. Their knees are wrecked. Their lower backs are bent. Their toes are deformed from the same crouching position. Day after day, year after year. You can still see it in their skeletons. Somewhere in the crowd, a child is coughing. And in a town this dense, a cough is no longer just a cough. It is a fuse. Of the skeletons from the early years of this town, up to 1 in 3 carry the marks of infection in their very bones. The scientist who spent 25 years studying them, Clark Spencer Larson, found a community drowning in its own crowding, its own waste, its own disease. But where did those new diseases come from? This is the part that turns the whole story into something darker. They came from the animals. When you live pressed against your herd, breathing their air, drinking their milk, stepping in their filth, their sicknesses learn to become your sicknesses. Measles came to us from cattle. Tuberculosis came from cattle. Smallpox, the disease that would one day erase whole civilizations, climbed into the human body from an animal pox somewhere in those early farming millennia. Influenza brewed in domesticated pigs and birds. Every one of these killers needed 2 things to exist. It needed herds to breed in, and it needed crowds of humans packed close enough to pass it on before it burned out. Farming, and only farming, built both. We did not just invent agriculture, we invented the plague. And now, the cruelest twist of all. Knowing everything you now know, the rotting teeth, the bent spines, the shrinking bodies, the new diseases eating the children, you would think farming should have failed, that people would have looked at the suffering and walked back to the wild. They couldn't, and here is why. Sick, starving, plague-ridden farmers still had more babies than healthy hunter-gatherers ever could. Settle down, plant grain, and you can feed more mouths, even if every one of those mouths is miserable. The farmers were worse off in every way that matters to a single human life. But there were more of them. And in the cold math of history, more always wins. That is the trap. Not a choice. A tide. Every generation simply had a few more children to feed than the land could support by hunting, so they farmed a little harder and grew a little sicker and could never, ever go back. The cage was built one hungry winter at a time, and no one inside it could even see the bars. So here is what we traded away. We gave up tall, strong bodies for short, aching ones. We gave up clean, whole teeth for mouths full of decay. We gave up 100 wild foods for 1 gray porridge. We gave up the freedom of the open land for a life bent over the same patch of dirt. And we gave up a world almost without epidemics for one where disease would shadow us forever. We didn't trade it for happiness. We traded it for numbers. For more of us, suffering more. The hunter-gatherer who looked up at the stars 300,000 years ago was, in almost every physical way, a healthier creature than the human being watching this screen right now. That is not a story your textbooks ever told you, and most of us will live our entire lives and die without ever knowing what we gave up, or that there was ever anything to give up at all. We call it the dawn of civilization. The bones call it something else. If this shook something loose in you, there is another story you need to hear, about what happened to the human mind in that same dark transition, and the one ancient instinct we have never gotten back. That video is waiting for you right now. Don't look away yet.